Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and please let me welcome you to our webinar. It's all about insights, silly, using social intelligence to create a smarter business, co-presented by Gleanster and Brandwatch. We will get started in just a minute, but first, there's a few housekeeping items I wanted to cover with you. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to ask any questions that you may have throughout the webinar via the session chat, and we'll answer them then. And if you have any technical issues with the webinar, we'll try to address those individually as best we can, so please send those through as well. For those of you who would like to tweet during the session, you can tweet to @Brandwatch or use the hashtag Brandwatch to reach our community managers. And finally, the most common question of them all, yes, we will be recording today's session, so we'll make sure to send that recording and the slides to you as soon as possible, most likely within 1 to 2 business days. So please be on the lookout for that. And now I'd like to introduce your host for today. First, we have Jeff Zabin, Research Director at Gleanster. Gleanster benchmarks best practices in technology-enabled business initiatives, delivering actionable insights that allow companies to make smart business decisions. And Jeff is joined by Yves Sanjanito, Vice President of Marketing at Brandwatch, a global provider of social analytics and monitoring solutions. So without further ado, I will turn it over to them.
Oh, and we have a little technical difficulty. Sorry about that.
All right. All right. Well, good. Well, I think I'll start here. And thanks, Drew. I appreciate that introduction, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share my perspective today, as well as some of Gleanster's latest research findings as they pertain to one of my favorite topics, which is social media monitoring and analytics. And thanks to Brandwatch, and thanks to you, Eve, for co-presenting.
Likewise.
On today's event. So, I love the title of this webinar. I can't take credit for selecting it, but the title, Using Social Intelligence to Create a Smarter Business, I think, is right on the money. I've always liked the term social intelligence. It's a term that I've written about and that has really been gathering a lot of steam over the last few years. And I do think it's a fantastic way to describe the next rung on that evolutionary ladder of social media monitoring. That rung maps to some of the key technology innovations that I think we're seeing today from leading solution providers like Brandwatch, and those innovations include everything from customizable reporting dashboards to multi-language coverage to all the capabilities related to the integration of social data with customer feedback data, CRM data, transaction data, and lots of other types of data. I think social intelligence also speaks to an emerging corporate mindset. That's what I'm seeing anyway, with respect to the strategic importance of listening to the voice of the consumer in social media. And the term social intelligence certainly conjures up all the right images. Of course, if you look at the word intelligence, that can mean not only an individual's ability to learn and to reason, but also a body of information and knowledge, right? So you think of the Central Intelligence Agency, for example, or business intelligence or customer intelligence, in which case that body of knowledge consists of consumer profile and other information stored in a centralized data repository. So really both meanings apply nicely in this context. I did some historical digging, and I found that the original concept or the original reference to social intelligence, this is a term that was coined in the 1920s, and it's used here to refer to an individual's ability to understand other people and to engage in adaptive interactions with them. So according to this 1933 issue of the Journal of Social Psychology, in case you missed it, P.E. Vernon said that social intelligence is the ability to gain insight into the temporary moods or underlying personality traits of strangers. And I think this 80-year-old definition is equally applicable today with respect to the advances we're seeing in social media monitoring. It really is that ability to gain insight into the personality traits and the moods of strangers. So on the next slide, as long as I'm sort of on a history roll here, I want to talk about my own grandparents for a moment. They were corner grocers They had a corner grocery store in Council Bluffs, Iowa, back in the 1940s, 1950s, and like all small-town merchants of that era, they worked hard to foster personal one-on-one relationships with their customers, and over time, they gained a deep understanding of their individual wants and needs, their preferences, their situations. They listened to their customers. They gained knowledge about them, or intelligence about them, if you will, and then they used that intelligence to engage with them further in personally meaningful ways and to further enhance the relationship. So my grandparents, they excelled at listening to the voice of the customer, whether it was from behind the cash register, or in the case of my grandmother, or behind the meat counter, and in the case of my grandfather. And so the point again is that this is really nothing new in terms of the concept itself, even if the implementation now requires all these advanced conversation mining and analysis technologies. And that's what companies are doing today, right? They're essentially putting these technologies in place to replicate those one-on-one listening skills, but of course on a massive scale. And that's not easy to do given the sheer volume of information, what everyone's now calling big data. And I don't think you need me throwing out facts and figures about how many people are using Facebook or Twitter, how many people are blogging or posting comments, how many people are using ratings and review sites. We already know it's in the hundreds of millions. And at a certain point, those numbers get lost, right? They become meaningless. It's like the national deficit. So we just need to recognize that, there's a huge amount of noise out there. It's almost deafening. Everyone's sharing their opinions, positive or negative. Everyone's making recommendations. Everyone's influencing other people's buying behavior. Everyone's sharing and retweeting and commenting on what everyone else is saying. And the onus is on companies to tune into all those conversations that are taking place every second of every day as consumers share their experiences. And also as they talk about things, their experiences, and not only with the services and products of that brand, but also as they talk about things that that may not relate specifically to those products or services, but may nonetheless be tangentially related in some way. So, next slide, please. And Eve, I think you wanted to talk about this. I would just say, it really is all about action in my mind, and creating these actionable insights means creating structure around unstructured data, right? And unstructured data accounts for all, the vast majority of the content that's out there in social networks and blogs and ratings and review sites. All those words and sentences, all the fragments of words and sentences, including all the new to the world abbreviations and acronyms that people post and share, all that information really falls under the umbrella of unstructured data. So the challenge, lies in being able to mine all those terabytes of unstructured data, separating the relevant content from the idle chatter, and generating those insights that drive action.
Yeah, exactly. I think the key point one to resonate here is it's one thing to understand the concept of intelligence and what it informs, but when the rubber really hits the road, it's about how do you measure that and how do you use it to your advantage, and whether or not you can take action upon it in various different ways is really how you discern if you're using it effectively. And this particular quote also dates back to sort of the 30s from an American author, Napoleon Hill, at the time. And so it was also used out of context of specifically to technology, but I think it still applies today, and it's still how we're seeing things evolve as we look at social intelligence. Yep. How do you use that in a customer context? Or a business context, really? Well, there's a lot of opportunities to use it in a business context. One is really looking at how customers experience your brand. I think a lot of us are familiar with customer life cycles, and here's a simple 5-step one, excuse me, that focus is on how people really understand working with a business. Oftentimes, if you're lucky, they'll start off becoming aware of who you are, considering a purchase with you, and then doing so moving forward. And if everything works out as planned, you'll retain that customer and hopefully convert them into an advocate. What that really means for businesses is giving you a whole lot of opportunities to take action. If you take the time to understand what their experiences are across all of those elements, you can really delve into a variety of opportunities at each step and at multiple steps throughout the process. And part of that starts with the fundamentals of really understanding how to break apart the components of what you're mining, the data that you're mining, the conversations that are happening. And Jeff, I'll let you weigh in here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I mean, I really like this idea of separating the signals from the noise. This concept of signal-to-noise ratio, that's a measurement system used in engineering to compare the level of a desired signal to the level of background noise. And when it comes to social media, as we said, it's almost all background noise. But it's a great concept when you think about comparing the ratio of useful information to irrelevant chatter, if you will. And I also like this analog TV that we kind of see here, because I remember as a child, I sometimes had to crawl around the unfinished attic of our house. And what I was doing up there was adjusting the TV antenna. This was back in the days of over-the-air broadcast television. I remember my father would be stationed in the basement with a walkie-talkie, watching the flickering screen of our TV, instructing me which way to turn the antenna to get the best picture. And our mission back then was to root out static by improving the signal-to-noise ratio, and then that's the exact same mission that every company is working to achieve today when it comes to social media monitoring. And how do you do that? Well, improving the signal-to-noise ratio in this case means honing in on that small fraction of consumer-generated posts and comments that are relevant to the brand, and that may yield actionable insights while eliminating the static, quote unquote, which is all the content that really has no value to the brand. And there are a number of ways to go about doing this. Some systems use Boolean search tools to identify and segregate posts based on keywords. Other systems out there use computational linguistic algorithms or natural language processing to break down the posts structurally, meaning by paragraph, by sentence, or grammatically, subject, verb, object, to provide an understanding of what's being said, and also, who's speaking, who's actually doing the talking. And some systems actually combine all these different approaches. One thing I'll say is that eliminating the noise isn't easy. Sometimes the challenges are actually unique to the brand, and I'll share a quick real-life example here. This one, and actually you can think of a lot of brands where just by their name itself, that presents a challenge. So Target comes to mind, or Best Buy, right? Those are all words that are commonly used, and the key is to contextualize them and understand how they're being used. So I want to talk about sentiment analysis just for a minute, because that's really been a focal point of social media monitoring activities, and for good reason. Extreme spikes or other deviations from normal patterns on both the positive and the negative ends of the spectrum may signal an issue that requires immediate attention, and also may require that the brand or the company take corrective action. So of greatest concern, of course, are spikes that can't be readily explained. So accuracy has been a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge without the right platform capabilities. But I've seen some dramatic improvement just over the last couple of years since I've been covering this space. And companies are now able to really tune those analytics algorithms, and there's a lot of machine learning that's happening along the way, and companies are getting very smart about being able to understand things like sarcasm and irony, and that's hard. And we've all heard lots of examples of how easy it is to misinterpret meaning and intentions. I tell people that probably the best dictionary to incorporate into your listening lexicon is the Urban Dictionary. And this is how my kids talk. That soccer player is raw. He's a beast. Those shoes are sick. My class is chill, and so on and so forth. You can tell I have teenagers, and that's all positive sentiment. In case you're as old as I am, and it's all very positive. But there's also degrees of enthusiasm. So I think that's important to point out here. Things aren't always just good or bad. Everything doesn't just rock or suck. We don't live in a binary world. So there are degrees and gradients of satisfaction and dissatisfaction that needs to be captured and scored and calculated and communicate it. And by the way, sentiment by itself doesn't tell much of a story, right? Some people are happy with a brand or a product, others aren't. The real question is the so what? Why is consumer sentiment accelerating and decelerating? What are the, what I call causal antecedents? What specific stimulus is generating that positive or negative buzz in the first place? So understanding the shift in sentiment, why it's happening is important. Is it happening across the board? Is it specific to a discrete population, a discrete segment of the population? Is there a particular group of brand advocates or detractors who are influencing sentiment disproportionately? If so, who are they? So what's motivating them to voice their perspective? So this is the important stuff that goes well beyond just doing simple sentiment analysis in terms of ratio of positive and negative sentiment. This is just sort of a silly example, since we had the word silly in the title of our presentation. I walked out the door of my office the other day, and I came across this gentleman who seemed a little perplexed in that he was going for a very pleasant bike ride, and all of a sudden he stopped, he went for a bite to eat, came back to his bicycle, and found that it was immobilized. And that's the problem. He couldn't continue his journey. The underlying problem was that someone else had come up with their bicycle, and they threw their chain over the frame of his bicycle, and he was going to be stuck there until they came back and unlocked it, and even this nice police officer couldn't really help. But the point here is that using social intelligence, we can begin to get at some of those underlying factors that are influencing a certain situation. And social intelligence is really about understanding, what's the non-obvious stuff that people are talking about that could have a very material impact on your business. What are they saying that could drive new product innovation, move your company into new opportunity arenas? What ultimately bubbles up from conversations may be completely counterintuitive and unpredictable, and those often are the most valuable insights. Those are the ones that compel you to jump into action. And it may be a brand reputation issue, it may be a new product development opportunity, but the goal there is to get below the surface and understand what's driving the conversation.
And that brings us to really understanding how to dissect those fundamentals. So Jeff was just referring to, all of those elements of sentiment and context and examples of those. But if you get really specific, you can even look down to a simple tweet at all of the elements that you can glean from it if you're looking at it in that way with that lens, for example. So in this case, we've extracted a tweet and just another sort of fun example in the case of talking about the Academy Awards. This was one person who tweeted representing, her perspective on who should win a particular Academy Award for a category. And you can glean out things like brand references, context, sentiment. You can learn things about the actual author. What is their influence, their reach? They have expertise in this area, and what is any expressed intent that they've referenced. And I use this example specifically because we were able to do this around the Academy Awards. Again, a fun example of how you go from being passive about your listening to being proactive and even predictive. In the case of the Oscars, we did an analysis. We were curious for ourselves about could we help discern who would win on certain Academy Awards categories that were popular, and even some that weren't particularly, the highlight ones. And in this case, based on dissecting those elements and how we analyze the data, we were able to public and the critics that were talking about those expressed elements about the Academy Awards were predicting as winners. Now, the Academy Award doesn't select their winners based on necessarily social media, but was a good use case of whether or not they were listening to the public view or aligned with the public view and the critics' view. And in this case, we found that they were. There were about 15 categories that we predicted accurately based on that by looking at the data in that particular view, and out of 18 categories, which I believe of all the predictive analysis that came out of the social Oscars was the most sort of accurate. And the reason being because we looked at the data from all of those views, which is a good signal to brands because you can apply the same methodology, the same foresight to working with different things that you're identifying around purchase intent, people that are trying to understand what are people buying in a certain industry or certain sector and what are some of the drivers behind what they're buying. So it's a fun example, but it's one that actually has quite a bit of business context. And in thinking about the business context, it's important, we're looking at the fundamentals of taking out the noise and looking at context and sentiment, but taking it up from the data itself, you always have to look at the business perspective as well. And so it's key to start with a purpose. We would always say that, I would say in almost any business strategy, is thinking about what are you trying to achieve with what you're doing. And there's a couple of data points referenced here. We often see brands, and this is research from a report that Jeff's organization worked on, starting in different areas of that customer lifecycle and use cases within an organization that are key. So some start in the arena of public relations, others will start in the arena of support, and some of them are broadening, and as organizations mature using social intelligence, broadening across the enterprise, which is a really important component. While it's important to start where your pain point is or where you can get the most value, using and applying that intelligence across the entire organization so that you can learn in all facets from what this big ocean of data is telling you is where you really get the most value over time.
Yeah, no, I think I was just going to say that, you know, the thing that I like most about this topic area is that, you know, social media monitoring really transcends all parts of the organization, to your point, and it can really benefit just about every function within the organization. And you know, we're even seeing new functions sort of getting into the game now. You know, the sales organization, for example, you know, they're beginning to integrate social data with CRM and Salesforce systems to identify and gain insights into you know, individuals as well as businesses that may be in the market to buy. But yeah, we're certainly seeing this migration to taking more of an enterprise approach to social media monitoring. And you know, that brings up a whole lot of you know, a bunch of issues like which group or groups should take the lead on sponsoring and funding and owning social intelligence. And it's a challenge that, you know, confronts large companies whenever it comes to a new business initiative that cuts across multiple departments. But you know, a lot of companies are stepping up to the plate. I'm seeing them approach this as a coordinated effort, and it's being championed and utilized by multiple departments as a shared services function with resources pooled across the enterprise. And it's interesting because it's not just about the technology, right? It's also to some extent a change management process that's happening. So
and a cultural one, yeah, absolutely.
So you know, so public relations. So I guess we're going to walk through a few of these specific groups, and you know, PR is interesting. They're one of the earliest you know, users of social data. You know, and they use it, of course, as an early warning system to help protect the brand, you know, help protect brand reputation and proactively address any potential issues. And you know, to that extent, social data can act as a canary in a coal mine, right? So you can use it to you know, understand, you know, what are the issues out there that may be sort of lurking on the horizon. And of course, there's no shortage of infamous PR nightmares, with new ones seeming to spring up on a regular basis that attest to the need for companies to not only listen to the chatter of online conversation as a way to identify sources of consumer discontent, but also to respond to those consumers in a timely manner. And I would say timing is everything when it comes to reducing the potential fallout from those complaints and the risk that you know, those angry words might spiral out of control. And in fact, I'm seeing some companies begin to implement time-sensitive metrics to really track you know, how well they're doing when it comes to reducing risk to the brand using social data. So, you know, are they able to reduce latency in terms of communicating, you know, the time to brand thread information to the right decision makers within the organization? So again, think of social intelligence as an early warning system it's a way to avoid or at least mitigate the impact of whatever detectable brand evaluation issues may arise.
Okay, great. And actually, that brings us to a use case we wanted to examine around that. And again, using it as a signal and being prepared are key components. You can't always control if there's going to be a PR crisis emerging, but you can be prepared. And Target is a good example of a use case that's come out over the last couple of months around that. So in April, one of Target's customers noticed on their website that one of their plus-size dresses was being described as manatee gray in color versus the standard size, which was being referenced as heather gray. And felt that this was somewhat derogatory and distasteful, given that manatee is a reference to a larger mammal, and thought that it was inappropriate in how they were approaching things. Now, we were tracking data around various retail organizations at the time for a report that we were doing, and we noticed the spike in velocity across multiple channels around this conversation, which could have emerged as a big risk for Target and what they were trying to make sure that they were controlling their brand image, and certainly didn't want to be perceived as having a derogatory view towards certain segments of their buyer audience. So in this case, being prepared and tracking and understanding when you see spikes in velocity is a key area of being able to then turn around and manage what's happening. And in this case, based on that analysis, we were able to see that not just the volume and the spike and the velocity were key, but also understanding how the consumer reaction was, how people were perceiving what was being shared. And by doing that, it was easy to see that most of the conversation was really around just sharing the news and was fairly neutral in tone. There was a small segment that was offended. And then there were some people that found it quite humorous and thought it was just a silly thing to point out. But more importantly, one of the things that Target did was they were prepared, they were watching what was being said, they turned around, they apologized for the incident publicly, and they removed the reference to that particular color quickly, and they were able to basically squash what could have been a damaging brand experience for them had they not necessarily responded in kind or knew the tone about how to respond to what was something that bothered a particular customer and then got viral really, really quickly. So that's a key reference on the PR side. There's a lot of examples of this, and some of those examples really show where people aren't prepared and how things are able to get out of control if you're not understanding what the data is actually saying. And in this case, this is one that was able to be controlled based on both the content, but also based on them reacting and responding in a way that was in line with what their consumers expected.
Great, yeah, I agree. That's a great example, and timing is everything when it comes to mitigating the risk and trying to avoid some of the negative repercussions. So on the market research side, really there's twofold benefits, I guess. Improving research effectiveness as well as reducing research time and cost. So I guess that's threefold. And a lot has been written about this. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, other than to say that there's obviously huge benefits out there in terms of sample size and immediacy and the unbiased nature of social data. There's lots of insights that you can capture relative to some of the traditional techniques, such as in-person research panels and focus groups. And there are also drawbacks. So I don't want to sugarcoat this because there's always questions as to whether the audience is truly representative of your target audience, and the fact that the posts are not written in response to specific questions that that can be beneficial, but can also have a downside. But I think it's fair to say that for most companies, customer-centric innovation is the only sustainable competitive advantage. So to the extent that these companies can use social data to, they can open a window onto the unmet wants and needs of customers, and even to some extent solicit their direct input into the ideation of products and services. There's a lot to be gained here. So So more companies are using social data as a basis for all kinds of market research activities, and they're happy to have consumers serve as an additional voice into the product development cycle. And Eve, I think you have another use case here that really illustrates this point.
Why, yes, I do. So in this case, this is a case study we recently released around using social intelligence to assess product design. So the Social Studies Group is a research firm that we work with, and they work with a number of clients using social intelligence to do a variety of different analysis. And in this case, they worked with a large consumer electronics brand, and they were trying to understand the consumer opinion of previously released devices from this particular brand. So one of the things was that they didn't feel that they had a broad enough view of offline data about the various conversations and the various perspectives of these particular devices. So they just had to tap into what was being said online. And it was important, too, because they wanted to isolate results on multiple different dimensions. So it wasn't just an analysis that was relevant to the amount of conversation happening overall or volumes related to a particular segment. It was also understanding how people felt in particular tone or in context around product models and their features. And in getting back to the point we were referencing earlier about using intelligence to take action, they wanted to do it for that very purpose. They were launching into another product development cycle, and they wanted to understand what they should learn before they launched into that product development cycle to apply to a future iteration of those products. In this case, there are a couple of figures that are represented here. The first one on the left is really about assessing how intuitive or easy a particular model was to use based on what consumers were saying, and people that had expressed being consumers of these products. So you can see, on the left, there's a variation. Thankfully for the client, there was a large representative sample expressing that their product model was intuitive, but there were segments, opportunities for improvement certainly expressed as well. On the figure on the right, it's representing what were some of the purchase drivers between two models over a 3-month period that led consumers to buying their particular devices from this brand. And in that case, so you can see reliability was obviously a key component of why people would turn to this brand for their particular mobile device. Features and the breadth of those features were certainly a second criteria that was key. So as they go into the product development cycle, applying those learnings and validations that they were able to discern from the conversations was really key. And there's certainly a slew of data below this in terms of what features, what were the elements of reliability. But at the snapshot view, this gives you a sense of what they were able to hone in on to understand what were driving the purchase decisions for their particular organization.
Great. So marketing, and I could talk all day about the value of social data in the context of marketing. And in fact, at Gleanster, we just published a deep dive analyst report called "Using Social Data to Make Smarter Marketing Decisions." And I would invite anyone who's interested in this topic to download it. But clearly for marketers, social data can be used to, I would say, to fundamentally reinvent how their marketing decisions are made. You think about it, for the first time ever, marketers can gain real-time access to, this whole world of consumer behaviors and attitudes and preferences and ideas and affinities and sentiments. So, such access, this type of access can really help inform and optimize virtually all aspects of their marketing activities, everything from product positioning to customer segmentation to campaign planning, execution, content development, as I'll discuss in a minute. And it's really, I think a lot of it comes down to driving relevance. I wrote a book a few years back called Precision Marketing, and it predates a lot of the tools that we have today. But that's really, that's the holy grail of marketing, right? Sending the right offer message to the right customer through the right channel at the right point of time. It's almost become a cliche at this point. But using social data, you can really begin to understand, who are the primary audiences and what do they have in common in terms of their attributes? Where do these individuals congregate? What are the topics of conversation that are typically discussed amongst them. And then you can begin to understand, how are they influencing other consumers' purchase decisions? How satisfied are they with the brand? I mean, there's just virtually no end to the information, the types of questions, and the answers that you want to glean from social data. It's all out there somewhere, and the challenge is to isolate it and analyze it and disseminate it to the right individuals. So on the next slide here, I think I mentioned that. Oh, I guess this is a use case. So I apologize.
No problem. To your point, though, I think marketing is obviously a broad area, and it's evolving all the time as new technologies come out and as people change their consumer patterns, and as things become more sophisticated that are available to them to get information. Even things around real-time marketing. So it's a broad area that we could dig into. In this case, we honed in on one case study that's actually an international example, which I think is a really interesting one personally, which is a news organization, Sky News Arabia, which launched actually just in 2012, so relatively recently, within the Middle East and Africa. And those are fairly entrenched news markets already, and they knew that if they were going to delve into this market, that they really needed to have an innovative approach to what they were doing. And so they turned to social media as a key component of what they were doing, and also analysis of that social intelligence from what was happening through those interactions to assess whether or not they were being successful in that goal. Some of the areas that they focused on were quick hit competitive intelligence, understanding how much conversation was going on around their news reporting versus some of the other competing organizations, understanding audience response. So one of the things that they do that's quite interesting is as reporters are sharing news, whether that be through social media or in typical viewer fashion or traditional fashions, they're assessing how much conversation is going on around that reporting and whether or not the tone of the language is in line with what they're looking for, as well as if there's any perceived bias. So they're really drilling into it at a deeper level. They also, there's a couple of goals that they have in being progressive. One is around making sure that they have timely news and unbiased news, and news that resonates with their audience. So some of that is reaching out to their audience in new ways, and making sure that they're interacting online. A lot of news travels today online first, through a tweet or some other mechanism. So they want to actually be active in that realm and be able to capitalize on that. So being aware of everything that's happening and being said, not just around their brand as an organization or reporters, but also the topics that are relevant, the news items that are relevant to their users. And the other component is really an operational one, understanding how using social media can help them become more agile as an organization and streamline how they gather news. So there's a wide variety. It doesn't just span marketing, but is certainly key to how they're differentiating themselves within the market and resonating with the kinds of viewers that they're looking to attain. And then our last use.
All right, customer service. So, so again, really twofold benefits here. It's improving customer service and customer satisfaction, and it's reducing customer service costs. And every organization under the sun is embracing social data as a way to accomplish both these goals. And consumers, expectations are high, right? Everyone has come to the point where they're expecting that their questions and complaints about products and services will be addressed by the brands themselves. And for their part, companies are that do a good job of addressing those questions. They're being rewarded with all kinds of positive tweets and consumer posts, and the ones that are ignoring customer questions tend to not do so well. So there's a lot to say here. I think when it comes to customer support costs, every call center is looking to minimize support rep time, and costs are obviously a key performance metric with customer service. So, again, social data long ago proved itself to be a critical component of this quest to deflect calls into the call center. And we're getting to the point now where large organizations are beginning to integrate social data into their help desk solutions, or what they're calling their customer experience management solutions, to manage those customer complaints at an operational level. And we're seeing support tickets that originated from social media being routed and prioritized and resolved in a systematic fashion through these systems. So it's really come a long way in just the last couple of years, and we're seeing huge cost savings for customer service organizations. All right, terrific. I think Eve was going to speak to this use case. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Drew.
Yeah.
But not to put you on the spot.
Right. This is just some research that we did, some analysis looking into different mobile phone providers, and some insights that you can glean based off of how people tweet. With monthly mentions that you can see here of switching between different providers. And then, it just speaks to the whole use case about being able to really do some customer service, as well as some possible, sales opportunities based on what you can do with social listening and some analysis. So there's, both the benefit of reaching out and engaging some people to avoid churn within your own business, as well as if you're a different business, looking at competitors' analysis of being able to possibly swoop in and grab some of that churn.
Great.
And this is just a different view of the expressed dissatisfaction here, looking at the percentage, the different mentions that we were able to grab within this 10-day period about different ones who would switch over. So you can see that there was a large portion here that wanted to switch to some of the major providers, I think, that we're all familiar with in the different markets between Verizon, Sprint, and AT&T. So as I was saying, there's real money at stake here, because if you monetize some of these opportunities, you can see that you can attach potential value to these and really see that you get ROI out of doing this social analysis. That there's definitely value attached to being able to jump in and take advantage of some of these mentions that show up when you do this sort of analysis and this sort of monitoring. And I think we're back over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that we recently published this new benchmark report called Social Listening, and again, I would invite anyone to come in and take a look at it. And I think it's about a 40-page report, and it benchmarks best practices in social media monitoring. So really looking to understand what top performers are doing in order to achieve their desired business objectives. So what are the technologies they're putting into place? What are the business processes? What performance metrics are they using to track and measure success? What organizational resources do they need to deploy? So I think it's a helpful roadmap for success that anyone embarking on this journey may want to take a look at. So I just wanted to mention that, and then I was going to share just a few data points, although I think we probably covered most of this already. So if you want to go to the next slide, Drew. 4 sections that we include in this report are reasons to implement, the challenges, value drivers, and then the performance metrics. So as we look at the data, these we provide, this is all survey-based research. We received, I think, somewhere around 350 responses to this particular survey that we put out that were qualified for inclusion in this report. And these were some of the top reasons for investing in this type of initiative in the first place. So, and no surprise here, so 94% said that improved customer service and satisfaction was the primary reason. 84% said improved marketing effectiveness, and then we can see driving customer loyalty. The whole brand reputation management comes into play here, and then market research. So on the next slide, which are the challenges. So what are the top challenges that companies are coming up against as they look to roll out this type of initiative? And the reality of the situation is that most companies have been doing social media monitoring for years. It's what they're doing now, obviously, is just enhancing their platform capabilities and improving their analytic capabilities. So as they look to further invest in this type of initiative, the challenges that they're coming up against include generating actionable insights from the data. You know, that's the stuff that matters, and it's easier said than done. Integrating the data with other voice of the customer data. So, you know, ideally, what you want to do is capture information about what your customers are saying, not only in social media, but through all the different channels that you interact and transact with them. So, you know, customer feedback, customer satisfaction surveys, call center, online chat, and so on and so forth. The goal is to funnel all this data into a centralized data repository, and if possible, begin to marry that with CRM data and create these unique identifiers so you can really understand who these customers are at an individual level and what they're saying about your brand and how they're influencing others out there. So you can even understand, you know, what's their you know, customer lifetime value to your company, which is interesting. Integrating, so we touched on that. Engaging influencers, and then of course problem resolution time, which is used by the call center. On the next slide, we have value drivers, and by value drivers, we're looking to understand what are companies doing to maximize the value of their investments in a social media monitoring initiative. So, so what they're doing is they're working to generate those insights that are actionable. They're actually that may have, I'm sure that's correct. That may be from a previous slide. They're looking to implement the right enabling technologies, and you know, a lot of big decisions that need to be made in terms of, you know, what are the right technologies to put into place, because there are a lot of choices out there in the marketplace, and there's trade-offs. You know, working with social data experts, and that makes sense for a lot of companies. There are you know, PhD statisticians and behavioral scientists out there who have a lot of experience interpreting social data and helping companies maximize the value of that data. And it may make sense to engage some of these folks. Disseminate the relevant insights to the right people within the organization is obviously key. You know, the information is useless if it's not acted upon, as we talked about earlier. And then identifying and segmenting consumers participating in social data, again, in terms of you know, demographic and behavioral and attitudinal attributes that matter to the brand. Okay, and then on the next slide, we talk a bit about the performance metrics. So what are the most commonly used performance metrics? And these aren't necessarily the best performance metrics, by the way, but what we're finding is that in order to track and measure success, companies are using a number of data sources and volume of social data. And I would argue that it's not always necessarily a case of the more the merrier. Everyone's always talking about, you know, the Twitter fire hose, and we're plugging into the you know, Facebook social graph. Well, at a certain point, there may be diminishing returns as you try to make sense of these huge, you know, this huge amount of data. So the question is also, you know, is this the right data? You need to sort of strike that balance. Customer satisfaction, customer loyalty scores. I think these are commonly used because companies are already measuring these metrics. Brand advocacy, everyone, of course, is using net promoter score today to understand you know, propensity to recommend. Customer service, cost reduction, that's obviously a key value driver, and then problem resolution time. So again, all this information is included in the report if you want to take a look at it, but I just wanted to touch on the highlights. And then I think on our final slide here, there's our thank you. I don't know if we have a couple minutes for questions and answers.
Yeah, I think we do. So let me just flip over to the questions for you, Jeff. So let's see. So our first question is, how can marketers find trending conversations that are relevant to a brand to create in time an intraday content marketing campaign?
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating that?
Yeah, sure. So how can marketers find trending conversations that are relevant to a brand to create and time an intraday content marketing campaign?
Yeah, I mean that's the value of these tools, right? In creating customizable dashboards that allow you to put in do the right Boolean keyword searches is one way to begin to get there. But as I said, it's not just about identifying. It's not just about plugging in products and service names and the name of the brand. There may be a lot of conversation that's happening that is also tangentially related that you want to follow. But I don't know if Drew, you want to talk about that in the context of the benefits that Brandwatch delivers.
Yeah, sure. So I think absolutely it goes back to what you said that you know it's it's all about just being able to monitor and glean, I think, some of those insights so that you can find those trending conversations and jump on those.
Yeah, I think, and I'm sorry, this is Eve. We solved our technical difficulty there finally.
Yeah,
Um,
finally.
in regards to that, I think it's about being prepared and watching the right signals. And you can do that in a variety of different ways. Sometimes you can approach that topically. Sometimes you can approach it in the scope of an actual time frame or a particular initiative or a particular event. But being sort of prepared and watching for those signals is a key part of whether or not you can do that. You can't just assume to jump on to something that's happening if you're not analyzing and watching in real time what is being said around a particular focus area. You have to have all of those elements sort of lined up and ready to take action once you see an opportunity.
And then if we want to do one final question here before we jump, because I know we're a few minutes over, how accurate is analysis for a company to trust it in making business decisions?
How accurate is the analysis? I mean, that's like asking what's the value of an insight, right? It depends on, an insight, depends on what you do with it. And I sometimes say that, an insight is nothing more than a penetrating view of the obvious. I think, accuracy is key. And to a large extent, I think that depends on the quality of the tools that you're using and to what extent you're able to, generate those insights that matter and put them in a format that makes sense. And you certainly need an interface to display the data. You need the visualization tools. You need the customizable dashboards to analyze the data. And basic systems out there provide a predetermined set of charts and graphs that show you volume and tone and trending over time. While more sophisticated systems like the ones that Brandwatch offers allow the user to set parameters and queries specific to their needs and their function within the organization. And I think that's really how you can begin to get to a deeper level of understanding and accuracy and ultimately this whole notion of social intelligence.
Okay. Well, I think we've sort of run a few minutes over, so I think we'll wrap it up there. I want to thank everyone for participating and apologize again for those technical difficulties that we ran into. And as I said at the start of the hour, we will follow up with the recording and the slides for everyone to have access to. So thanks again. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Eve.
Great. Thank you.
All right.